The warning lights flashed red across the bridge of the UES Liberty as Captain Jake Morrison watched his dying ship struggle through unknown space. 3 years had passed since they left Earth on humanity's first journey to another star, and now everything was falling apart. The engines made horrible grinding sounds that echoed through the metal halls, and sparks flew from control panels that had worked perfectly just days before. Morrison ran his hand through his gray hair and looked at the faces of his crew, seeing the same fear he felt in his own chest. Dr. Lisa Walsh stood at her science station, her fingers dancing across the broken screens as she tried to make sense of the readings. The numbers made no sense at all. According to her instruments, they were not alone in this star system. Something big was moving toward them, something that definitely was not natural. She turned to Morrison with wide eyes and said the words that would change everything. "Captain, we have company." The Liberty had been Earth's greatest achievement, a research ship built to study distant worlds and search for signs of life. Now, as alien vessels appeared on their screens like ghosts materializing from nothing, the 47 humans aboard realized they might have found much more than they bargained for. The alien ships moved in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming silver against the black of space, and their weapons were already pointed at the damaged human vessel. Commander Zektar stood on the bridge of his warship and stared at the impossible readings his sensors were showing him. The unknown vessel had appeared from nowhere, moving faster than light without using the hyperspace lanes that every civilized species had used for thousands of years. This was not supposed to be possible. His science officer, a thin creature, with 4 arms and large golden eyes, chittered nervously as more data flowed across their screens. The alien commander had seen many strange things in his long military career, but nothing like this. The primitive-looking ship was damaged and leaking atmosphere, yet somehow it had traveled between stars using technology that should not exist. Zektar's orders were clear. Any unknown vessel found in Council space was to be captured or destroyed, but something about this situation felt different. The ship was clearly not a threat in its current condition, and the energy readings coming from its engines defied everything he knew about physics. Back on the Liberty, Chief Engineer Ryan Brooks crawled through the narrow maintenance tunnels, trying to keep their exotic matter drive from exploding and taking half the ship with it. The drive had been humanity's greatest breakthrough, a way to fold space itself and travel faster than light without the need for the theoretical hyperspace that scientists had argued about for decades. Now it was killing them slowly, leaking dangerous radiation and threatening to tear the ship apart from the inside. Brooks wiped sweat from his forehead as he worked on the damaged systems. He had helped design this drive back on Earth, spending years perfecting the equations that made it possible to manipulate the fabric of space-time itself. The theory was beautiful, but the reality was much messier. The exotic matter required to power the drive was incredibly dangerous, and one small mistake could create a black hole that would swallow everything within 1,000,000 kilometers. Morrison received the first alien transmission while Brooks was still fighting to keep them alive. The message came as a series of mathematical patterns, starting with simple prime numbers and building up to complex equations that Dr. Kevin Hayes, their physicist, recognized as universal constants. The meaning was clear even without words. The aliens were intelligent, they understood mathematics, and they wanted to communicate. Dr. Walsh worked frantically to decode more of the alien signals while Hayes tried to send a response using the same mathematical framework. The alien messages were becoming more complex, and buried within the numbers was something that made Walsh's blood run cold. The aliens were not just trying to talk. They were giving the Liberty an ultimatum: surrender or be destroyed. The standoff lasted for 6 hours, with both sides trying to understand each other, while weapons remained trained on the human ship. Zektar found himself in a position he had never faced before. His duty required him to eliminate any potential threat to the Galactic Council, but his curiosity as a scientist made him desperate to understand how these unknown beings had achieved the impossible. When Morrison finally made the decision that would change galactic history, he did it not as a military commander, but as an explorer. He ordered Hayes to transmit the mathematical principles behind their faster-than-light drive, hoping that scientific curiosity would overcome military caution. It was the biggest gamble in human history, and Morrison knew that if he was wrong, humanity's first contact with alien life would also be their last. The transmission lasted only minutes, but its impact on the alien fleet was immediate. Zector watched his science officers examine the human data with growing excitement and disbelief. The mathematics were crude but functional, describing a method of faster-than-light travel that bypassed hyperspace entirely. If this was real, if these primitive beings had actually solved one of the galaxy's greatest puzzles, then everything would change. Brooks managed to stabilize the drive just as the first alien shuttle approached the Liberty. Morrison stood in the docking bay wearing his best uniform and trying to look calm, while his heart pounded like a hammer in his chest. Behind him stood Walsh, Hayes, and 6 other crew members who would become humanity's first ambassadors to the galaxy. They had no idea what to expect, no training for this situation, and no backup plan if things went wrong. The alien shuttle was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at, all flowing curves and surfaces that seemed to shift and change in the light. When it docked with the Liberty, Morrison heard the hiss of atmosphere equalizing and realized that the aliens breathed the same air as humans. It was the first small miracle in what would become a series of impossible coincidences. Zector stepped through the airlock and found himself face to face with the first humans he had ever seen. They were smaller than he had expected. Soft-looking creatures with strange hair covering their heads and skin that changed color with their emotions. But their eyes held an intelligence that he recognized, and when their leader stepped forward, with his hand extended in what was clearly a gesture of greeting, Zector realized that the galaxy would never be the same again. Ambassador Veltara arrived on the Liberty 3 days after first contact, bringing with her a team of the galaxy's most brilliant scientists, and a mind that had spent 200 years studying the mysteries of faster-than-light travel. She was a tall, elegant being with silver skin that reflected light like polished metal, and when she spoke, her voice carried the authority of someone who had advised the Galactic Council for longer than humanity had existed as a species. But now, as she stood in the Liberty's cramped engine room listening to Chief Engineer Ryan Brooks explain impossible physics, she felt like a student again. Brooks pointed to the massive cylindrical device that dominated the center of the engine room, its surface covered with warning labels in a dozen human languages. The exotic matter containment unit hummed with barely controlled energy, and even the alien instruments that Veltara's team had brought aboard showed readings that made no sense according to everything they knew about the universe. Brooks explained how humanity had discovered that space itself could be manipulated, folded like a piece of paper so that distant points touched each other across the void. The mathematics were elegant in their simplicity, and that was what bothered Veltara the most. Her people had been traveling through hyperspace for over 10,000 years, using technology that required massive ships, enormous amounts of energy, and navigation computers that filled entire rooms. The humans had achieved the same result with a device that could fit inside a shuttle and equations that could be written on a single piece of paper. Dr. Kevin Hayes joined the discussion, his excitement barely contained as he shared the theoretical framework behind humanity's breakthrough. The key was exotic matter, a substance that existed in the quantum foam of spacetime itself and could be harvested using techniques that humanity had developed almost by accident. Hayes explained how they had discovered that certain cosmic events created pockets of negative energy that could be captured and stored, providing the fuel for their space-folding drive. What Hayes did not mention, because he did not yet understand, its significance was that the exotic matter they used was unique to their solar system. Earth's sun had undergone a rare stellar event billions of years ago, creating a field of exotic particles that had been slowly accumulating in the outer reaches of their star system. Humanity had stumbled upon the galaxy's rarest resource without even realizing it. Veltara's chief scientist, a creature whose name humans could not pronounce but whom they called Dr. Blue because of his skin color, examined the drive components with instruments that cost more than most planets' annual budgets. What he found challenged everything his civilization believed about the nature of reality. The human drive did not punch holes through space-time like hyperspace technology did. Instead, it convinced space-time to move around the ship, creating a bubble of distorted reality that carried the vessel faster than light while technically never exceeding that speed within the bubble itself. The implications struck the gathered scientists like a physical blow. Hyperspace travel had always been dangerous, requiring ships to enter a parallel dimension filled with hostile entities that attacked anything that moved too slowly or strayed from established routes. The hyperspace lanes were like highways through hell, and every species in the galaxy had been forced to use them because there was no alternative. Humanity had found that alternative, and it was safer, faster, and infinitely more flexible than anything the galaxy had ever imagined. Brooks found himself overwhelmed by the questions from alien scientists who had devoted their entire lives to understanding faster-than-light travel. They wanted to know everything about exotic matter, about the mathematical principles behind spacefolding, about the engineering challenges of containing negative energy in a stable form. Brooks answered as best he could, but he began to realize that humanity had accomplished something that the galaxy's greatest minds had been trying to achieve for millennia. Captain Morrison watched the scientific exchanges from the bridge, where he was receiving reports from Earth through their experimental quantum communication system. The messages from home were urgent and conflicting. Some wanted him to share everything with the aliens, hoping to build peaceful relationships through scientific cooperation. Others demanded that he protect humanity's technological advantage at all costs, fearing that aliens with superior numbers and resources would use human innovations against their creators. Morrison made his decision based on what he saw around him. The alien scientists were not trying to steal human technology. They were trying to understand it, to learn from it, and to figure out how it could benefit everyone. Veltara had made it clear that the Galactic Council was not interested in conquering humanity. They were interested in survival, and humanity's technology might be the key to solving problems that had plagued the galaxy for thousands of years. The truth began to emerge during late-night discussions between Hayes and Dr. Blue, conversations that started as scientific debates and evolved into something much more important. Dr. Blue revealed that hyperspace travel was not just dangerous because of the entities that lived there. It was limited, controlled, and monitored by forces that no one in the galaxy fully understood. The hyperspace lanes were like prison walls, keeping every species confined to specific regions of the galaxy and preventing true exploration of the universe beyond. Hayes listened with growing amazement as Dr. Blue described the Hyperspace Guild, a secretive organization that had controlled galactic travel for longer than recorded history. The Guild claimed to be protecting civilization from the dangers of hyperspace, but their protection came at a price. No species could travel beyond the established routes without Guild permission, and that permission was rarely granted. Entire sectors of the galaxy remained unexplored because the Guild declared them too dangerous to visit. Humanity's drive technology changed everything about this carefully maintained balance of power. With space-folding drives, ships could travel anywhere in the galaxy without using hyperspace at all. They could explore uncharted regions, establish new trade routes, and discover resources that had been locked away for millennia. Most importantly, they could do it all without asking permission from the Guild or anyone else. Veltara found herself in an impossible position as she realized the full implications of human technology. As an ambassador, her duty was to report her findings to the Galactic Council and recommend appropriate action. As a scientist, she knew that humanity had just handed the galaxy the key to freedom from an ancient prison. As a person who had spent her entire life watching civilizations stagnate under Guild control, she wanted to see what would happen when that control was finally broken. The decision was taken out of her hands when Brooks made a discovery that terrified and amazed him in equal measure. The exotic matter in the Liberty's drive had begun to reproduce itself, creating new particles that had not existed when they left Earth. The drive was evolving, becoming more efficient and more powerful with each passing day. If this continued, humanity would soon possess the ability to mass-produce faster-than-light drives and share them with anyone who wanted to explore the galaxy freely. That night, as alien and human scientists worked together to understand the implications of evolving exotic matter, Veltara sent a message to the Galactic Council that would change the course of history. She did not report a first contact situation with a primitive species that had stumbled upon advanced technology. Instead, she reported the discovery of a solution to the galaxy's oldest problem, delivered by a people who had no idea what they were offering to a universe that had been waiting for freedom for 10,000 years. The Galactic Council chambers had not seen such tension in over 1,000 years, and High Counselor Thekmars felt the weight of history pressing down on his ancient shoulders as he called the emergency session to order. Representatives from 47 different species filled the vast circular hall, their voices creating a symphony of languages that the translation systems struggled to keep up with. At the center of it all sat Captain Jake Morrison and Dr. Lisa Walsh, the first humans ever to set foot in the galaxy's seat of government, surrounded by beings who looked like they had stepped out of humanity's wildest dreams. Thekmars was older than human civilization itself, his species having achieved spaceflight when Earth's ancestors were still learning to use fire. His skin was like living stone, gray and weathered by centuries of difficult decisions, and his eyes held depths that spoke of secrets carried for far too long. He looked at the humans with something that might have been pity, knowing that their innocence was about to be shattered by truths that had been hidden from most of the galaxy for 10 millennia. The revelation began with a simple question from Morrison, asked with the directness that seemed to characterize his species. He wanted to know why the galaxy had never developed faster-than-light travel that did not require hyperspace, given that the mathematics behind space folding were not impossibly complex. The silence that followed his question stretched for long, minutes filled with exchanged glances between species representatives who clearly knew something that others did not. Dr. Amanda Foster, the Liberty's cultural anthropologist, sat beside Walsh and took careful notes as Thekmars began to speak. His words were measured and careful, chosen with the precision of someone who had spent centuries learning when truth was more dangerous than lies. He told them about the early days of galactic civilization, when dozens of species had been developing, their own methods of faster-than-light travel, exploring the galaxy freely and establishing colonies wherever they chose. The freedom had lasted less than a century before the first disappearances began. Ships would set out for distant stars and simply vanish, leaving no trace except for final transmissions that spoke of impossible things moving in the darkness between worlds. Entire colonies would go silent overnight, their planets found empty, and scarred by forces that left no survivors to explain what had happened. The pattern was always the same, and it always happened to civilizations that strayed too far from established hyperspace routes. Walsh listened with growing horror as Thekmars described the entities that lived in hyperspace, beings of pure energy, and malice that fed on the life force of travelers who dared to enter their domain. The hyperspace lanes were not highways through another dimension. They were tunnels of safety carved through a realm of predators, maintained by ancient technology that no living species fully understood. To leave the lanes meant death, and to attempt alternative forms of faster-than-light travel meant attracting the attention of things that were better left alone. The Hyperspace Guild had emerged from this chaos as humanity's saviors and jailers, both. They claimed to be the descendants of the first species to master hyperspace travel, the keepers of ancient knowledge that allowed safe passage between stars. Under Guild control, the galaxy had achieved a kind of peace, but it was the peace of prisoners who had learned not to rattle their chains. No species was allowed to develop alternative faster-than-light technologies. No colonies could be established beyond Guild-approved sectors, and no questions could be asked about why the galaxy had to remain forever limited. Morrison felt sick as he began to understand what humanity had stumbled into. Their space-folding drive was not just a technological breakthrough. It was a direct challenge to a system of control that had kept the entire galaxy confined for thousands of years. By sharing their technology with the Council, they had not just made first contact. They had declared war on the forces that ruled the space between stars. Lieutenant Commander Steve Parker, monitoring communications from the Liberty, intercepted transmissions that were being sent across the galaxy faster than any official channels could carry them. The news of humanity's technology was spreading like wildfire among species that had spent generations dreaming of freedom from Guild control. Some of the messages were celebrations, others were warnings, and a few were clearly calls to action. from groups that had been waiting centuries for an opportunity like this. Dr. Kevin Hayes found himself at the center of urgent consultations with alien physicists who had spent their entire careers studying theoretical alternatives to hyperspace travel. Most of their research had been conducted in secret, hidden from guild informants who monitored scientific communities for signs of forbidden knowledge. Hayes realized that humanity was not alone in their desire to explore beyond established boundaries. They were simply the first to succeed. The council session continued for 18 hours, with species representatives sharing stories that had been classified as state secrets for millennia. The Zephyrian delegate spoke of entire research teams that had vanished while working on faster-than-light alternatives. The Korthak representative described planets that had been mysteriously sterilized after their scientists made breakthroughs in exotic matter manipulation. Every species had similar stories, and every story ended the same way, with the guild arriving to restore order and ensure that dangerous research was discontinued for the safety of all. Foster documented everything, knowing that she was recording the most important historical moment in galactic civilization. The stories painted a picture of a galaxy that had been deliberately kept primitive and limited, not by lack of scientific ability, but by fear of entities that punished innovation with extinction. The guild had not been lying when they claimed to protect civilization from hyperspace predators. They had simply forgotten to mention that protection came at the cost of freedom. Walsh made the connection that changed everything when she compared the timeline of guild control with the disappearances that had preceded it. The entities in hyperspace had not been random predators attacking unlucky travelers. They had been enforcers, systematically eliminating any species that developed the ability to travel beyond established boundaries. The guild had not defeated these entities or found a way to protect civilization from them. The guild was working with them, serving as their agents in normal space. The revelation struck the council like a physical blow, and several representatives had to be restrained as they processed the implications of what Walsh had discovered. For 10,000 years, their civilization had been managed by beings who served creatures from another dimension, creatures whose agenda was to keep the galaxy confined and controlled. The hyperspace lanes were not escape routes from a dangerous dimension. They were cattle chutes, keeping every species moving along predetermined paths while their true masters watched from the spaces between worlds. Dekmars confirmed Walsh's theory with the weariness of someone who had carried the truth alone for far too long. He had been one of the few council members who knew the real nature of the guild, bound by oaths and threats to maintain the secret that kept civilization stable. The entities in hyperspace were not content to simply control galactic travel. They were preparing for something larger, something that required every species in the galaxy to remain exactly where they had been placed. Morrison looked around the council chambers and saw his own determination reflected in dozens of alien faces. Humanity had not come to the stars seeking war, but they had found a galaxy enslaved by forces that treated entire civilizations like livestock. The space-folding drive was not just a way to travel between worlds. It was a weapon that could free billions of beings from a prison they had never realized they were in. The session ended with a unanimous vote that would have been impossible just hours before. The Galactic Council formally recognized humanity as a sovereign species and entered into a defensive alliance that committed every member civilization to developing and deploying faster-than-light technology that bypassed hyperspace entirely. It was a declaration of independence from forces that had ruled the galaxy for millennia, and everyone in the chamber knew that those forces would not allow such rebellion to go unpunished. As the representatives dispersed to carry word back to their homeworlds, Hayes received a priority transmission from Earth that made his blood freeze in his veins. Deep space monitoring stations had detected massive energy signatures moving through hyperspace toward the galactic core, traveling faster than anything the Guild had ever deployed. The entities were responding to humanity's breakthrough, and they were not coming to negotiate. General Patricia Collins stood in the Situation Room deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, watching displays that showed the construction of humanity's first interstellar battle fleet with a mixture of pride and terror that she had never experienced in 40 years of military service. The quantum communications from the Liberty painted a picture of a galaxy on the verge of civil war, with humanity's accidental breakthrough serving as the spark that would either liberate billions of beings or get them all killed in the process. Collins had spent her career preparing for conflicts with human enemies, but now she found herself planning for a war against entities from another dimension that had been manipulating galactic civilization for 10,000 years. The fleet taking shape in Earth's orbital shipyards represented the combined efforts of human engineering and alien science, with technologies that had never been tested in battle and theories that existed only on paper being rushed into production with desperate urgency. The ships were hybrids, incorporating humanity's space-folding drives with defensive systems provided by Galactic Council species who had been secretly preparing for this day for centuries. Collins knew that they were building a fleet to fight an enemy they did not understand using weapons they had never tested, but the alternative was surrender to forces that viewed entire civilizations as property to be managed. Captain Morrison found himself promoted to admiral and placed in command of a situation that no military academy had ever prepared him for. The Liberty had become the most valuable ship in known space, not because of its weapons or armor, but because it carried the only functional space-folding drive that had been tested in actual combat conditions. Every faction in the galaxy wanted control of it, and Morrison spent his days navigating political minefields while trying to keep his crew alive and his ship operational. The Hyperspace Guild emerged from the shadows like a cancer finally revealing itself, abandoning centuries of careful manipulation in favor of direct action that shocked even species who had suspected their true nature. Guild fleets appeared in dozens of star systems simultaneously, their ships moving with coordination that spoke of planning and preparation that had been decades in the making. The ultimatum they delivered to every civilized world was simple and absolute: surrender all faster-than-light technology that bypassed hyperspace, or watch their suns burn out. Dr. Lisa Walsh worked around the clock to establish communication protocols with species that had been contacted by the Guild and given impossible choices. The messages flooding in through quantum communication networks painted a picture of a galaxy dividing itself along lines that had been drawn in secret long before humanity had ever looked at the stars. Some species chose to surrender immediately, terrified by Guild demonstrations of power that could sterilize entire planets with weapons that left no trace of how they worked. Others chose resistance, forming alliances based on shared desperation and a desire for freedom that had been building for millennia. Chief Engineer Ryan Brooks made the discovery that changed everything while working on repairs to the Liberty's increasingly unstable drive system. The exotic matter that powered their faster-than-light travel had not just begun reproducing itself. It had begun evolving, developing new properties and capabilities that defied every theory about how such substances should behave. The drive was becoming more efficient with each passing day, requiring less energy to fold larger amounts of space and creating effects that Brooks could not predict or control. The evolution was accelerating beyond anything that natural processes could account for, and Brooks realized with growing alarm that the exotic matter was responding to external influences that he could not identify. Something was causing the drive to develop new capabilities, and that something was not bound by the laws of physics that governed normal matter. Brooks shared his findings with alien scientists who had been studying exotic matter for centuries, only to discover that similar evolution was beginning to occur in experimental drives being built by other species. Dr. Kevin Hayes detected the first hyperspace disturbances while monitoring deep space with instruments that combined human sensors with alien detection systems. The readings were unlike anything in the databases, showing energy signatures that moved through hyperspace without following any of the established lane networks. Whatever was creating these disturbances was not bound by the rules that had limited galactic travel for thousands of years, and it was heading toward inhabited systems with purpose that spoke of intelligence and planning. The disturbances were accompanied by communication attempts that bypassed every known method of faster-than-light messaging, reaching ships and planets instantaneously regardless of distance or intervening obstacles. The messages were not in any language that translation systems could decode, but their emotional content was clear enough. They carried undertones of desperation and fear that suggested the senders were fleeing from something rather than attacking something. Morrison received reports from council fleets engaged in running battles with guild forces throughout the galaxy, and the news was uniformly grim. The guild ships fought with weapons and tactics that seemed to ignore the laws of physics, teleporting through space without using faster-than-light drives and attacking with energy beams that passed through shields as if they did not exist. Every engagement ended the same way, with guild forces withdrawing after demonstrating their overwhelming superiority and leaving behind ultimatums that gave local governments days to surrender. The pattern became clear when Dr. Amanda Foster analyzed the guild's behavior from a cultural perspective rather than a military one. The guild was not trying to conquer the galaxy through force of arms. They were trying to maintain control through demonstrations of power that would convince resistance movements to surrender without forcing a war that might damage the very civilizations they were trying to preserve. The guild needed the galaxy species alive and productive, which meant their threats had limits that could be exploited by anyone desperate enough to test them. Lieutenant Commander Steve Parker intercepted communications between guild commanders that revealed the truth behind their restraint. The entities from hyperspace were not interested in ruling an empty galaxy filled with dead worlds. They needed living civilizations for purposes that the guild messages hinted at, but never explicitly described. The references were vague and coded, but they suggested that galactic civilization was being preserved for harvesting rather than protection. The revelation came too late to prevent the guild's most devastating demonstration of power, but it arrived in time to change how the galaxy responded to it. The guild chose Earth's sun as their target, not to destroy humanity, but to demonstrate what would happen to any species that continued to resist their authority. The star began to dim as guild technology drained its energy, creating solar winter conditions that would have forced humanity's surrender within months. Brooks made humanity's final contribution to the galactic war effort while working desperately to counteract the guild's attack on Earth's sun. The evolved exotic matter in the Liberty's drive had developed the ability to interact with hyperspace entities directly, not as a weapon, but as a form of communication that bypassed the guild entirely. The entities were not the monsters that galactic civilization had been taught to fear. They were refugees fleeing from something far worse, and they had been using the galaxy as a hiding place while searching for a way to fight back against their own predators. The truth that emerged from Brooks' contact with the hyperspace entities reframed the entire conflict in ways that no one had anticipated. The guild had been created by the entities not to serve as their agents in normal space, but to manage the galaxy as a fortress that could defend against cosmic predators that consumed entire civilizations. The hyperspace lanes were not prison walls designed to keep galactic species confined. They were defensive positions created to focus the galaxy's resources on maintaining barriers that held back things that made hyperspace entities look harmless. By comparison, Hayes confirmed the entity's warning when his deep space sensors detected movement at the galactic rim that dwarfed anything they had encountered so far. The cosmic predators that had been hunting the hyperspace entities had finally found their hiding place, and they were coming with force sufficient to devour every living thing in the galaxy. The guild's attempts to maintain control were not about power or domination. They were about survival for everyone, human and alien alike. Morrison found himself facing the ultimate command decision as reports poured in from across the galaxy describing the approach of entities that existed to consume life itself. Humanity's space-folding technology had not just freed the galaxy from ancient restrictions, it had announced their location to predators that had been searching for them for millennia. The choice was no longer between freedom and slavery. It was between unity and extinction, and there might not be enough time to choose wisely. Commander Lisa Rodriguez emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler system, leading humanity's first interstellar battle fleet, expecting to face the cosmic horrors that had terrorized galactic civilization for millennia, only to discover that everything the galaxy believed about the hyperspace entities was wrong. The beings that materialized around her ships were not monsters from another dimension seeking to devour life and civilization. They were refugees fleeing from something infinitely worse. Creatures of pure energy whose terror was so complete that it radiated through space itself, like a physical force. The entity that spoke to Rodriguez through methods that bypassed every form of communication humanity had ever developed called itself the last of the shepherds, and its voice carried the weight of civilizations that had been consumed by predators from the spaces between galaxies. It told her a story that reframed everything the galaxy thought it knew about hyperspace, about the Guild, and about the prison walls that had kept billions of beings confined for 10,000 years. The shepherds had once been a species much like humanity, curious and innovative beings who had developed faster-than-light travel and spread across their galaxy with the enthusiasm of explorers discovering infinite possibilities. Their technology had been different from humanity's space-folding drives, but equally effective, allowing them to travel freely between stars and establish colonies wherever they chose. Their civilization had thrived for millions of years before. They encountered the Devourers, cosmic predators that existed to consume life itself. The war between shepherds and Devourers had lasted for eons and ended with the near extinction of both species, but not before the shepherds learned something that filled Rodriguez with cold terror. The Devourers were not unique to their galaxy. They existed in the void between galaxies, patient and eternal, waiting for civilizations to develop faster-than-light travel and announce their locations through the energy signatures that such technology created. Humanity's space-folding drives had been broadcasting the Milky Way's position to these predators for 3 years. Captain Morrison, now serving as Admiral of the Combined Galactic Fleet, received this information while coordinating defenses around Earth, where the Guild's attack on humanity's sun had been halted by technology that no one fully understood. The exotic matter drives throughout the galaxy had evolved simultaneously, developing capabilities that allowed them to interact with hyperspace directly and share energy across impossible distances. Ships equipped with the new drives could draw power from the exotic matter fields of distant vessels, creating a network of shared resources that spanned the entire galaxy. Dr. Lisa Walsh worked with alien philosophers and strategists to develop what would become known as the Liberty Doctrine, a complete revision of galactic civilization's approach to survival that recognized the universe as a far more dangerous place than anyone had imagined. The doctrine acknowledged that hiding was no longer possible once faster-than-light technology had announced their presence to the cosmic predators, which meant the galaxy's only choice was to unite and fight with everything they had. The Guild, leadership, revealed now to be the last surviving shepherds who had taken physical form to guide younger species away from the fate that had befallen their own civilization, made their final offer to the assembled representatives of 47 different species. They would share the complete archives of shepherd technology and tactical knowledge, everything they had learned during their million-year war against the Devourers, in exchange for the galaxy's commitment to a unified defense that would require sacrifices from every world and every species. Chief Engineer Ryan Brooks found himself at the center of the most important engineering project in galactic history as the evolved exotic matter revealed its true purpose. The substance was not just fuel for faster-than-light drives. It was a form of living technology that could adapt and evolve to meet whatever challenges it encountered. The exotic matter fields throughout the galaxy were connecting themselves into a vast network that could share not just energy but information and consciousness itself. The network was preparing for something that the shepherds had never achieved during their own war against the Devourers. It was creating a collective intelligence that could coordinate the defense of billions of worlds simultaneously, processing information and making decisions at speeds that no individual mind could match. Brooks realized that humanity had not just discovered a new form of faster-than-light travel. They had awakened something that had been sleeping in the quantum foam of space-time, waiting for a species with the right combination of curiosity and desperation to give it purpose. Dr. Kevin Hayes made the final breakthrough that turned the tide of the approaching war, when he discovered that the Devourers were not invincible cosmic forces beyond the understanding of lesser species. They were parasites, creatures that had evolved to consume the life energy of civilizations, but had never developed the ability to create or innovate on their own. Everything they knew about faster-than-light travel, everything they used to hunt between galaxies, had been stolen from species they had consumed over millions of years. The weakness that Hayes identified was simple and devastating. The Devourers could not adapt to new technologies or tactics because they lacked the creative intelligence necessary for innovation. They attacked using methods that had worked against previous civilizations, but they could not modify their approach when faced with something genuinely new. Humanity's space-folding drives were not just different from the faster-than-light technologies the Devourers had encountered before. They were incomprehensible to minds that could only copy and consume rather than create and discover. The battle for the galaxy began not with fleets of warships exchanging fire across the void, but with a choice that every sentient being had to make individually. The exotic matter network required conscious participation from every species, every world, and every person who wanted to be part of the collective defense. It was not enough to simply agree to fight. Each individual had to choose to become part of something larger than themselves, surrendering personal autonomy in exchange for the power to stand against cosmic predators. Rodriguez led the first wave of ships equipped with network-enhanced drives into the approaching Devourer fleet, expecting to face overwhelming odds and hoping only to buy time for the galaxy to complete its preparations. Instead, she discovered that the network had transformed every ship into something unprecedented in galactic warfare. The vessels moved with perfect coordination, their drives sharing energy and computational power to create tactical advantages that no enemy could predict or counter. The Devourers fought as they always had, using brute force and superior numbers to overwhelm their opponents through tactics that had worked against countless civilizations. But they had never faced an enemy that could adapt in real time, sharing discoveries instantly across thousands of ships and implementing new strategies faster than any individual mind could process. Every attack the Devourers launched was analyzed, understood, and countered before it could be repeated. Morrison watched from Earth as the battle reports flowed in, showing impossible victories won by ships that should have been hopelessly outmatched. The network was not just coordinating galactic defenses. It was learning from every encounter and becoming more effective with each engagement. The collective intelligence created by billions of connected minds was solving problems that individual species had struggled with for millions of years. Dr. Amanda Foster documented the transformation of galactic civilization as species that had been isolated for millennia discovered what they could accomplish when working together. The cultural barriers that had divided the galaxy for thousands of years dissolved in the face of shared purpose, and new forms of art, science, and philosophy emerged from the fusion of different ways of thinking. The network had not just created a military alliance, it had given birth to a truly galactic civilization. The final phase of the war lasted only days, but its consequences would shape the galaxy for millions of years to come. The Devourers found themselves facing not just superior technology, but superior thinking, and they could not adapt quickly enough to survive against an enemy that grew stronger with every passing moment. The cosmic predators that had terrorized the universe for eons were destroyed not by weapons, but by the creative force of minds working together toward a common goal. Brooks made the last entry in the Liberty's engineering log as the ship that had started humanity's greatest adventure was prepared for its final mission. The Liberty would serve as the core of a new kind of vessel, one that existed simultaneously in normal space and hyperspace, serving as a bridge between the physical universe and the dimension where the last shepherds maintained their eternal watch. The ship that had brought humanity to the stars would ensure that no other civilization would ever again face the cosmic darkness alone. The galaxy that emerged from the war was transformed beyond recognition, united by shared experience and connected by technology that made the old boundaries between species meaningless. Rodriguez, promoted to admiral and tasked with exploring the universe beyond the galactic rim,